There once lived a man who married twice, and his second wife was the haughtiest and most stuck-up woman in the world. She already had 2 daughters of her own, and her children took after her in every way.
I'm so hot.
Her new husband's first wife had given him a daughter of his own before she died, but she was a lovely and sweet-natured girl, very like her own natural mother, who had been a kind and gentle woman. 3. The second wedding was hardly over before the stepmother showed her true colors. Her new daughter was so lovable that she made her own children seem even more unpleasant. By contrast, so she found the girl insufferable. She gave her all the rough work about the house to do, washing the pots and pans, cleaning out Madame's bedroom, and those of her stepsisters, too. She slept at the top of the house in a garret on a thin, lumpy mattress, while her stepsisters had rooms with fitted carpet, soft beds, and mirrors in which they could see themselves from head to foot. The poor girl bore everything patiently and dared not complain to her father because he would have lost his temper with her. His new wife ruled him with a rod of iron. "Father! Father!"
Be quiet!
When the housework was all done, she would tuck herself away in the chimney corner to sit quietly among the cinders, the only place of privacy she could find, and so the family named her Cinderbridges. But the younger sister, who was less spiteful than the older one, changed her nickname to Cinderella. Yet even in her dirty clothes, Cinderella could not help but be 100 times more beautiful than her sisters, however magnificently they dressed themselves up.
I'll call you Cinderella.
Oh. The king's son decided to hold a ball to which he invited all the aristocracy. Our 2 young ladies received their invitations, for they were well-connected, busy, and happy. Yay! They talked about nothing except what they were going to wear.
I shall wear my red velvet with lace trimming.
Well, I shall wear just a simple skirt, but put my coat with the golden flowers over it. And of course, there's always my diamond necklace, which is really rather special.
Oh, that's first.
They called Cinderella to ask for her advice because she had excellent taste. Cinderella helped them to look as pretty as they could, and they were very glad of her assistance, although they did not show it. At last the great day arrived. When they went off, Cinderella watched them until they were out of sight and then began to cry. Her godmother saw how she was crying and asked her what the matter was.
I want to.
But Cinderella was crying so hard she could not get the words out.
I think you're crying because you want to go to the ball.
Yes.
If you're a good girl, I'll send you there.
Cinderella, I need you to go into the garden and pick me a pumpkin. Then I need 6 live mice. After that I need 1 rat and 6 lizards.
Okay. There you go.
There you are. Now you can go to the ball. Aren't you pleased?
Yes!
The godmother had only to touch her with her ring, and Cinderella's workday overalls and apron changed into a dress of cloth of gold and silver, embroidered with precious stones. Then she gave her the prettiest pair of glass slippers. Now Cinderella was ready. She climbed into the coach, but her godmother told her she must be home by midnight, because if she stayed out the ball 1 moment more, her coach would turn back into a pumpkin, her horse to mice, her footmen to lizards, and her cloths back into overalls again. As soon as they saw Cinderella, an enormous silence ceased. The dancing ceased, the fiddlers forgot to ply their bows, as the entire company gazed at this unknown lady. The only sound in the entire ballroom was a confused murmur. The king's son seated her in the most honored place and led her to the dance floor. She danced so gracefully. She was still more admired. She herself went and sat beside her sisters and devoted herself to entertaining them. She shared the oranges and lemons that the prince had given her with them, and that surprised them very much, for they did not recognize her. Cinderella then heard the chimes of the clock striking 11:45, made a deep curtsy, and ran off as quickly as she should. The next day, the sisters went off to the ball again. Cinderella went too, but this time she was even more beautifully dressed than the first. The king's son did not leave her side and never stopped paying her compliments, so that the young girl was utterly absorbed in him, and time passed so quickly that she thought it must still be 11 o'clock when she heard the chimes of midnight. She sprang to her feet and darted off as lightly as a doe, and the prince sprang after her, but could not catch her. In her flight, however, she let one glass slipper fall. The king's son had found the glass slipper, and so plainly was very much in love with the beautiful lady to whom it belonged. A few days later, the king's son publicly announced that he would marry whoever possesses the foot which the glass slipper had been made. They made a start by trying the slipper on the feet of all the princesses, then moved on to the duchess, then to the rest of the court, but all in vain. At last they brought the slipper to the two sisters, who did all they could to squeeze their feet into the slipper, but could not manage it, no matter how hard they tried.
Oh,
Ah!
Cinderella watched them and said,
I like to try and see if it not fit me.
At last they brought the slipper to the two sisters, who did all they could to squeeze their feet into the slipper, but could not manage it, no matter how hard they tried.
Ah!
Cinderella watched them and laughed, recognized her own slipper at once, and said,
I like to try and see if it not fit me.
Her sisters giggled and made fun of her, but the gentleman who was in charge of the slipper trial looked at Cinderella carefully and saw how beautiful she was. Yes, he said, of course she could try on the slipper. He sat Cinderella down, and as soon as he saw her foot, he knew it would fit the slipper perfectly. At that, the godmother appeared. She struck Cinderella's overalls with her ring, and at once the old clothes were transformed to garments more magnificent than all her ball dresses. Then her sisters knew she had been the beautiful lady they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet to beg her for forgiveness and the bad treatment she had received from them. Cinderella raised them up and kissed them, and said she forgave them with all her heart and wanted them only to love her. Cinderella, who was as good as she was beautiful, took her sisters to live in the palace and arranged for both of them to be married on the same day to great lords.
Would he say he's in L-O-V-E? Well, if it was me.
Cinderella watched them and said,
I like to try and see if it not fit me.